All right, welcome everybody to our third webinar in our series of exploring career opportunities in ecology. So happy to have each and every one of you joining us. I am your host, Aaron Stoller. I currently serve in the industrial sector as an applied ecologist for ExxonMobil Biomedical Sciences. I also serve as senior chair for ESA's public and private sector ecologist section and have served on ESA's membership committee. For those of you that are renewing your ESA membership or thinking about becoming members, just if you're interested, you can always check that box to join the public and private sector ecologist section. It's only $5 extra on your membership, and it gets you access to our group and gets you emails about events. The purpose of this webinar is to share stories and guidance for all job seekers in the world of ecology. And the reason that we're doing this is because more than ever, there's an abundance of ecology careers available in government, industry, consulting, education, nonprofit organizations, all sorts of different sectors. And ecologists in these sectors lead incredibly fulfilling careers that are helping to translate research into sustainable futures. These ecologists are also generating novel research in collaboration with partners across sectors and in academia. But oftentimes, mentors for students at colleges and universities are not prepared to guide students along those career paths. And so this webinar helps a little bit, as much as we can, provide a source for information about those career paths to students and other job seekers. The webinar series is here to help all job seekers in finding career opportunities, to broaden networks, perhaps to provide some hope for those that are struggling to find their niche, and to help ESA cast a wider and more inclusive net over the professional ecological world. With me today, I have currently only one guest, but I'll introduce both just in case Blake comes. So Pacifica Sommers, who is a metagenomics data scientist with Bayer CropScience. And our other guest, when he comes on, is Blake Amos, who is an environmental specialist from Kinder Morgan. We'll have a conversation with Pacifica first. If Blake comes on, we'll have a conversation with him second. Let me just hold on one second. Okay. We'll have a conversation with him second. If you ask a question and need to leave before the end, no worries. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for your listening pleasure after its conclusion. If you have a question, there is a Q&A button at the bottom that will definitely help us in answering your questions. If we don't get to your question, don't worry about it. We'll answer them after the webinar is over. We'll send out responses afterwards. And of course, you can always stay tuned for all of our contact information at the end. You should definitely connect with us on LinkedIn, send us emails. We're happy to help guide you, provide additional advice, or just have a conversation. So with that, I just want to check my email and make sure that Blake hasn't emailed me or something. Nope, we're good. All right, Pacifica, I'm gonna just let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your job, who you are, where you're coming from, how you got there, whatever you would like, and then we'll start with a few other questions.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Pacifica Sommers. I have a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Arizona, and I am currently in a role as a data scientist or metagenomics data scientist at Bayer CropSciences, which is a big agriculture company, as well as pharmaceutical company, for those who aren't familiar. I've been in this role for about 2 years, and I would say this is perhaps one of the most unexpected turns my career could have taken. I am an environmentalist and now a trained ecologist. And so after getting my bachelor's in biology, I actually started my career working for nonprofit organizations, including National Wildlife Federation and coalitions that included NRDC and other environmental groups that are often more adversarially sort of situated to companies like Bayer. So that's sort of like where I saw myself my first couple of years after my bachelor's degree, working for those nonprofits, as well as various internships with the Bureau of Land Management embedded in offices there, and research labs like at Penn State. But I always had my eye on going back to grad school, thinking that I wanted to do more mathematical modeling and have more expertise. To be honest, being interested in environmental policy, I thought I was going to get a PhD so I could better advise what direction we should be taking in policy. And my plan was to get a PhD and then get a AAAS fellowship to be embedded in a congressional office, skip years of answering constituent mail to actually have more impact and more informed impact on science policy. But along the way to get my PhD, I remembered how much I love field work and being outdoors compared with being in meetings. And I decided, I don't really want to go back to policy. I want to get a postdoc where I can go do field work. Um, at the time, my PhD was very much in like grass invasions and national parks and the implications there. So still a very sort of somewhat applied, but also some fundamental interaction kinds of questions in ecology, but with this conservation and management sort of perspective, and very much looking at what I would now call macroorganisms. Um, I decided somewhere along the way of the fieldwork there, as I was standing sideways to squeeze into the foot-wide shade of a saguaro cactus at noon in Arizona in 115-degree weather, that I wanted my next role to be somewhere like Antarctica. And so I started networking to try to find a postdoc in Antarctica. And to make a long story very brief, I wound up finding a role where I could spend 3 research seasons in Antarctica and the McMurdo Dry Valleys to study the microbial ecology of the glaciers there, which meant that I would have to learn or relearn what little bioinformatics and molecular biology I remembered from undergrad. And I'd always thought, oh, I don't want to be a lab scientist. So I didn't really focus on those parts, but um, I kind of thought, it would be worth getting back in touch with this bioinformatics in order to go to Antarctica. So that's what I did. And after that postdoc, kept writing grants with my postdoc advisor to get to go to Svalbard in the Arctic, continue studying microbial ecology of retreating glaciers in the Rocky Mountains as well as the Arctic. And in the meantime, I was looking for more permanent roles because any of you that are in the webinar that are doing soft money kinds of roles know it can be kind of exhausting to keep writing grants and to have that level of uncertainty. So I was applying for some faculty roles, but I had sort of a personal connection to I need to live somewhere with pretty good skiing and rock climbing, just from like a personal life balance perspective of like I need big enough mountains that are cold enough for me to be happy. So that meant that I wasn't applying that widely to faculty roles. Same thing with government roles, applied to some of those. Eventually attended a career panel on industry roles for microbial ecologists and followed up with panelists there, did some information interviews. And I eventually, somebody introduced me to somebody who introduced me to somebody who introduced me to these 2 microbial ecologists working at Bayer. And they were familiar with my PhD advisor and his work. They were familiar with my postdoc advisor and his work, which to me, those felt like really different worlds of sort of community ecology, modeling, conservation on one hand, and like polar microbial ecology on another hand. And so it's sort of shocking to find my people working in big ag. So a few months later, when one of them was promoted, the other of those people was hiring her replacement and reached out to me and said, hey, you should apply. And I was frankly kind of shocked they offered me the role because I was like, I study like glaciers, right? I don't really know anything about agriculture. And so I decided to take this role and try it out. It's fully remote. I'm still based in Boulder, Colorado, where I did my postdoc. And I work fully remotely doing data science to discover microbial traits that we can use in biotech crops. And so that means a lot of microbial ecology, but it from a really sort of different perspective in terms of trying to find traits that I wasn't thinking about from a glacier perspective, traits like for deactivating xenobiotics, like herbicides, different types of chemicals, traits, microbial genes that could kill insects, crop pests that would be eating the crops, for example. So I work closely with folks that are in the lab, and then they sequence DNA, and I'm analyzing the DNA from in the cloud from my place in Boulder. So that's a sort of a description of my journey and why it's so unexpected for me to find myself in this role.
It certainly sounds like you've had Quite a repertoire of experiences. And I like to I love that because I try to stress to everybody that your career is not linear. It's very circuitous. Not yours personally, but everybody's that finds success. You kind of grab a hold of opportunities. What was it like working in the Antarctic?
It was a real honor and privilege and humbling and exciting and stressful. It's beautiful. If you are enamored with sort of extreme and austere kinds of landscapes, the way I am, and find snow and ice and wide open spaces beautiful and sort of soul fulfilling, Antarctica is a great place.
Yeah,
There's a really, as you might imagine, interesting and tight community of people who choose to spend months at a time somewhere so remote, and you have to really rely on one another and work with one another closely. And so you form a really unique community. So there's this tight community and this beautiful and extreme landscape, and you're there for a reason, for a short time period or a longer time period, and you're trying to deal with the stresses of team dynamics and unexpected weather and bureaucracy and logistics and situations that come up. And yeah, it was a real learning experience, and I would go back in a heartbeat if I had an opportunity.
yeah. It certainly sounds like it. I've never had a chance to do it myself, but so I want to hit on a few points. The first is the one that please feel free to pass if you don't feel comfortable answering it. But you for a lot of the career seekers that are on here, you mentioned this tendency where you first started working in with policy and thought you were going to be working NGOs and whatnot, and now you're working in something that you thought of being adversarial to those. Can you speak a little bit about that? Not specifically about the company that you're in, but about the industrial sector and scientists such as yourself working in the industrial sector, whether it is adversarial or is there any ethical dilemmas? That's kind of a question that we get asked a lot in the industrial sector. So in any way that you're comfortable answering that, please do.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's, to be honest, I would say the biggest sort of more ethical dilemma for me is sort of at the existential or more philosophical realm, in terms of um, the current agricultural production system that we have does create a lot of carbon emissions, does use a lot of resources, but it is how we're feeding people right
Mm,
now. So it's really important to support the growers who are making a livelihood out of this, and especially some of the smaller growers, and to support the food supply for people to keep food prices affordable. But our current structure also has all these environmental impacts. So I think part of my sort of bigger picture is, by working within the system for our company, I'm trying to find products and ways to help shape that better supports biodiversity while supporting growers and people's lives. Um, and there's always that question of whether you can have more impact sort of working within a given system versus working from sort of a more outside perspective of that particular industry to help shape the laws, regulations, and opinions that help drive the business values. Because I do see that actually from working within Bayer, there's different, regulatory environments and new laws in like the EU and in various like states in the US that do shape what products are feasible to have on the market and how, and that does drive business directions, and that drives the sort of research agenda of scientists like me. And so it does make a difference. So yeah, I think some of that, I have a little bit of that basic philosophical dilemma. I do ultimately, the way I personally feel about that is you need people who have good technical understandings as well as values for like biodiversity and environmental sustainability, working both within that industry and system as well as from that sort of external driving and directing perspective. And so right now I'm taking a turn working within this industry and learning a lot about the constraints and the needs and what drives it. And I think that's really important to have my expertise informing that. And I find it the majority of my colleagues as scientists in R&D are also really interested in environmental sustainability. There's a need, obviously, for like a company that's set up to find products that can make a profit, because that's the capitalist system that we have like set up and that we operate in. And so anywhere where we can find intersections that both protect, like reduce resource use, try to improve biodiversity, and can also then advance the company's profits, that's like where we try to focus our efforts.
Yeah. I love that answer. I often kind of think of it as taking the blue pill from the Matrix. You know, you started off outside of capitalism and outside of the economic sector, and then you sort of learned all the stuff that goes into it, and now you can work within that system to do better, to do good. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you. Yeah.
That's the way I see my mission in terms of my interest in taking this role. And I've
Yeah.
only been in it 2 years, and I told myself, well, I'll try it out for 2 years and sort of see where I want to go from there. For now, I want to stick with this. I'm working on some exciting projects. I really like my colleagues. I see potential to make a difference in the long run. And so, but I'm definitely not ruling out going different directions with my career in the future too. I don't see myself as being locked into this role for sure.
As an industrial scientist, do you feel as though you still own the scientist that is you? Do you feel like you can still be true to the scientific ideals that you were raised with in your academic career?
Yes, because I'm still, and I know that people work in a variety of different kind of roles. I'm still very much in sort of discovery, and um, it feels like fairly fundamental research where I sit in R&D. I'm looking for microbial traits that we could propose to test to use in a product that wouldn't be approved like until it had been tested for all the safety and efficacy. So it'd probably be like 15 years before it's a product. So we're looking kind of way out in the future, thinking about what we can design for then. So it feels pretty fundamental in some ways, even though it's very applied. One thing I actually like about the constraints about, hey, we need these types of products, like for crop protection, is that it does kind of put you in a box, and that's an artistic exercise that people do sometimes. If you think of sonnets, very strict rules for this poetry form, and with the idea that it can help bring out more creativity when you have to find your way out of that box, rather than if everything's wide open, it can feel a little bit daunting and stifling. So I actually kind of like having those constraints and that direction for a team to pull together to unleash the creativity to say, okay, so how can we use these constraints then to do the kind of discovery and test the kind of hypotheses that we're interested in that could really make a difference for growers in the environment?
I love that. That's a great way of thinking about it. I hadn't really considered it. The people that you work with, the colleagues that you work with, I know that I personally work with people across the board, including academics, other consultants and other industry folks. So, I mean, what's your experience like? Who do you get to work with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, I'm mostly working with other scientists at Bayer. Bayer's a huge company. There's like 99,000 employees worldwide. Like, obviously that includes like the pharmaceuticals and all the salespeople and everything that I'm not really working with. I'm mostly working with other research and development scientists, even within just the US R&D part of like Bayer CropScience. We have an internal conference called Innovations in Crop Science. It's just Bayer scientists every summer. That's almost as big as ESA. It's like a few thousand attendees. So it's a huge community to work with. So I'm mostly working with internal Bayer scientists, although we do have active collaborations with outside other companies, as well as academic labs. And so we'll bring in academic postdocs, professors, or people from other companies to give seminars, to work with us on specific projects, to work as contractors. But like 90% of who I'm working with is other Bayer scientists. Now, that being said, some of those are also microbial ecologists. Some of them are plant physiologists. Some of them are protein structural specialists, chemists. Um, I'm actually currently working on a project involving wastewater treatment from chemical manufacturing plants. And so I get to work with the chemical engineers from the production facilities, which is a pretty interesting and different group of people, and data engineers and software engineers. So yeah, it's a real interdisciplinary group, which is cool. I'm always learning something outside my expertise. Entomologists too. I didn't even say like all of the entomologists. Yeah.
It's a little bit different than you would have gotten if you stayed working policy or if you stayed working with NGOs. I think, at least, I don't think that I've ever been exposed to this much variety of scientists until I went to industry either.
Yeah, and I was really seeking out and fortunate to find good collaborations in my postdoc and soft money phase. We did get like a 10 PI grant funded jointly from the UK Research Institute and NSF for our Svalbard work, and we had geophysicists as well as hydrologists as well as microbial ecologists and modelers. So I was already kind of like seeking out that like cross-disciplinary and broad kind of project. And so that's really fit my interests working at Bayer with these really broad expertise teams.
Great. Um, so let's go back and think of ourselves as a young student looking for careers and what we're most worried about, what we're most interested in. Um, and as an undergraduate, you're always worried, did I take the right classes and am I working with the right internships? As a graduate student, you're thinking, okay, well, which direction do I go? And do I like focus on work-life balance for the immediate term, or do I um, focus on career first? And it sounds like you have some good insight there. I love the story that you say you wanted to stay near the mountains. That was a personal life decision. Um, let's just start with that, like your work-life balance, and your personal decisions for being in a place that you love. What advice do you give to others in thinking about those decisions?
Well, I think it definitely depends sort of on your short-term circumstances, right? There's going to be times that for you personally, it makes sense to like really throw yourself into something career-wise, even if it means going to a place that you're like is far from family or is far from your mountains or whatever that is for you, the beach, the coast. For some people, they're not happy away from that. Um, some there's times that it does make sense to do that for short term. I definitely bounced around geographically after graduating from college and um, from like Nevada to Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. And before landing in Arizona for grad school and learned different things about myself, about where I was and wasn't happy. And so I think that's not a bad idea. Ultimately, like I said, I did discover that my soul started to wither a little bit if it wasn't near large mountains and wide open spaces. And so that ultimately meant that for me to be happy, I needed to be in the Western US. And what I discovered from Arizona was that that also included some like very cold, like snowy places. So sort of the northwest of the US is sort of where I'm going to be happy. And it's not really worth it to me to, at this point in my life, to spend a lot of years somewhere where I'm not going to be so happy.
I think that there's enough job opportunities, and a growing number of job opportunities in the field that you don't have to limit yourself, either if you're a young person. You should definitely, like, I agree that you should definitely be ready to bounce around a little bit, and
If you're
explore
able
outside of
to
your
and
comfort zone.
interested. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. You know, if you're graduating from grad school and you started a family and you've got little kids and it's just not in the cards, like there's other opportunities if that's just like not going to work for you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
But yeah, if you have the freedom, there are great opportunities if you are able to bounce around a little and explore that.
Got it. I see lots of questions coming in, and thank you so much. We're gonna hold off on the questions just in the event. I'm still not seeing the other speaker in here, so I do want to just hold off until figure out if he's coming on, and if not, we'll open it up for all kinds of questions in just a second. Um, I want to ask you a question, and I didn't forgive me because I didn't give you this question ahead of time. So again, feel free to
Spicy.
pass. I know, feel free to pass. Um, but how do you feel about being a woman in industry, versus your opportunities being a woman in other sectors? And again, feel free to pass if you don't want to answer that.
I think that's a good question because I think there's a lot that's hard to recognize, and that can be really subtle. Especially I think as a woman in data science. in industry. That's also maybe slightly less common than being a woman in biology and in some other parts of biology. I don't know. I would say so far my experience has been that I have a really constructive group of colleagues and um, that there are actively people in leadership roles that are thinking about that and thinking about making sure to be fair to people and different ways that people interact and react and think about their career development, and that they try to proactively address those by like individually like having relationships with colleagues and trying to help people develop in ways that they want to and that are fair across the board. So there may be things that I don't see yet. I certainly know that there are within Bayer, there are what they call business resource groups, BRGs, for different identities that can be marginalized. One of those being there's a BRG for women, and there's also a group for women in data science, or WIDS in particular, that's there to create extra kind of growth opportunities, development opportunities, recognition, support, resources. So so far I've seen that being, my experience has been that there's a lot of support and consideration for different
Awesome.
identities.
That's great. That's great. And I mean, it really speaks, I think, volumes to the support that you're getting in industry right now, that you can seek out those groups and proactively be a part of that larger community. That's great. So Blake, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to switch to you in just a second. Pacifica, I like ending with this question for anyone that I'm talking to about their career. What do you think is the thing in your current career that you're most proud of at the moment?
A project I'm really excited about. I alluded to a minute ago, I'm working with these these chemical manufacturing plants and their wastewater treatment facilities. So basically, those of us in biotech discovery have partnered up with the wastewater treatment. So we want to find more microbial strains that can degrade xenobiotics or chemicals like herbicides. And so where would you find those? As ecologists, we know somewhere where they're really present. So maybe in the wastewater of the plants that manufacture them. Meanwhile, these manufacturing plants sometimes have upsets in their microbial, their activated sludge, their digesters. And so those upsets can cause expensive problems for their systems in terms of managing and cleaning them. So we actually have a cool kind of microbial ecology project going right now, where we're looking at the microbial ecology of that sludge, both to help the managers keep it sort of in balance as the different production campaigns change throughout the year. So this is a ecology problem, right? Interaction with their environment of different substrates and different diversities, how to maintain the best possible outcome for the production, and also what traits can we find there that we can then use for bioremediation or biotech crops to advance product concepts. So we have justification to work on it. So I'm hoping I'll be able to come to ESA next summer at annual meeting and tell you about some of our cool microbial ecology results from that really unique ecosystem.
It actually sounds really fascinating. I'm so excited to hear about that. Um, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra with ESA Webinars for just a couple minutes for some quick announcements. In the meantime, Pacifica, there's a lot of questions that have been coming out on the Q&A, some great ones. There was one about salary. Feel free not to answer that one if you choose not to. I will say that industry does tend to pay more than academia in general, but that is usually something that people are sensitive about talking about. For all of you that are asking questions, please continue to do so. I encourage you to do so with the Q&A button instead of the chat button. It does help us organize those questions later on. Sandra?
Thanks, Aaron, and Blake and Pacifica. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Del Rio, Professional Programs Coordinator at the Ecological Society of America. Thank you for joining us today. This is the third session of the Exploring Career Opportunities in Ecology webinar series, and we're pleased to share that these are the upcoming series dates. We have another one coming up on December 5th, January 7th, February 4th, and March 4th. All from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be sharing the links in the chat in just a moment, but you can find them in all of these opportunities in the ESA websites. I also want to remind you that ESA does have a professional development program. We're always looking for suggestions on what to host, what kind of training our ecological community is looking for. Again, there is a form that you can submit your suggestions there and share with us what you would like to see. Additionally, I'd like to mention ESA's Professional Ecologist Certification Program. For those who might not know, ESA does have this credential and it has been around for over 40 years. And you don't have to be an ESA member to get certified. You can learn more about the program at esa.org/certification or email cert@esa.org with any questions. We'll also have an informational webinar and Q&A session on January 2021. So feel free to join us there as well. And some important ESA announcements. We want you to know what we're doing as a professional organization, as a scientific society. So the call for proposals is still open for the ESA 2025 annual meeting. It will be in Baltimore, Maryland. This year's theme is Ecology is Everywhere, and we invite you to submit your proposals for symposia, organized oral sessions, and inspired sessions. And the deadline for that is November 14th. Also, we have the nominations for ESA Awards, Fellows, and Early Career Fellows is still open. This is a great opportunity to celebrate your mentors, your colleagues, and peers. And the deadline for that has been extended and is now, the deadline is November 18th. And see, and that's it. We'll share these later, but that will be all. Back to you, Aaron.
You can always throw them in the chat now if you'd like. So great to see so many questions coming in. Again, I think Pacifica can answer some of them offline. If you have access to it, just nod your head. Yeah. Yeah.
It looks like I can only chat to hosts and panelists right now. I don't know if there's, so I'm
Okay.
not sure I can reply to people in the chat. Oh wait, there we go.
Okay, cool.
Sandra must have fixed it. So on it.
Excellent. It'll just help ease up on some of the questions afterwards. Blake, happy to have you on. Thank you for coming on. Can you introduce yourself? So Blake Amos, for those of you that missed the introductions, from Kinder Morgan. He's an environmental specialist, work, I believe, in permitting and compliance. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your career pathway, how you got there, and what you are doing in your current profession.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. A quick audio check, making sure that you can hear me and it comes through well.
Yep.
Great.
Sounds great.
I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity. Apologies for the time zone issue. That the time zone was showing up in different devices for me as 2 Central. So I was very excited to get on in about 26 minutes. And Sandra, thank you for sending that email. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so as you said, I work as an environmental scientist and ecologist for a company called Kinder Morgan. They're an oil and gas energy large company. It's kind of similar to ExxonMobil, I think, as you work for, Aaron. Why do I work for a company like that? That's kind of an interesting thing that they would have an ecologist on staff, right? With a company like that, it's really a utility company. And they have people like me on to help out with permitting and compliance. So if we have existing infrastructure in, I think, 42 states and Canada and Mexico. So it's a big company. With all that infrastructure, just maintaining it and doing some kind of expansion here and there, they've got to have somebody that helps out with environmental permitting. And again, compliance, once they get to construction and do the work, staying in compliance. It's part of consulting. Before I got into this job, I worked for a different company before that and a different company before that as a consultant, really in the same industry. The degree that I've got, so undergrad, I went to Jacksonville State University in Northeast Alabama, go Gamecocks, and got a degree in biology. Went on to Louisiana State University, LSU, so go Tigers, and that was in renewable natural resources. It's kind of in the forestry department, and did a thesis there focused on forested wetlands. And first job out of college was working for a consultant firm that was local in Baton Rouge, and got plugged into kind of the local industry down there, which is it's a lot of energy infrastructure. That first job, and still to this day, kind of what I do, the environmental permitting part, it's a whole lot of things like field surveys that involve wetland delineations, water bodies surveys, protected species habitat, think like endangered species, threatened species, state listed species habitat surveys, mussel surveys, and we're always teams typically in the field with archaeologists. You'll usually have two teams out there. You've got your biologists, ecologists out there doing kind of the habitat and wetlands and water body surveys, and then you've got your archaeologists who are looking for cultural resources and do those field surveys, come back into the office, write up the reports, look at assessments, work with agencies, be it local agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, to work through permitting. And some of the cool things we get to do is help to make sure that this energy infrastructure keeps going, but doing it in a sustainable way. So that's one thing that I really like about what I do. So I've been doing this now 18 years, and I've been at Kinder Morgan for almost 10 now. So was in Baton Rouge, but now in Birmingham. If you haven't picked up the accent yet, definitely was born and raised around this area in Birmingham. That's where Jacksonville State is, and love my time in Louisiana, but back in Alabama now.
It's a great it's a great trajectory and overlap a little bit. I was just down in Baton Rouge a few months ago at the refinery that's down there. It's like one of the largest refineries in the country. It's an interesting place, Baton Rouge, for sure. So yeah, I mean that's a great career trajectory. Very different from Pacifica's, which is fantastic. It's exactly what we want. So you really started out of undergraduate in consulting, if I got that correct. And it sounds like you've spent most of your time in consulting since. What is your feeling about being a scientist in consulting versus other routes that you could have taken, like being an academic scientist, a professor at a university, an industry scientist, or maybe an educator?
Yeah, it's a great point, because so when I finished my degree, my master's degree, right, went straight to consulting in academic world in LSU at Renewable Natural Resources, working around all of these professors and research associates, just the world that you know, right? And it's comfortable. It was a little difficult to figure out what it would look like working for a private consulting firm. You hear some good things, you hear some bad things. And so I was a little unsure of how that would go. But for me, I think it boils down to kind of a more practical approach, application maybe is a way to say it. I see research as a way to develop new ideas, new learning, new tools, new technology. And then consulting, we actually get to use those things and put them into practice, more real world application. And that's something I really, really like about consulting, is getting to see those things put into place, put into action to really make a difference. Like I said, in those projects we do, we get to help protect certain habitat or certain species, or that kind of cultural resources, and route things around that and protect it. So it's really kind of where the tire meets the road, and being able to apply that kind of thing. In education, was able to do a little bit of that in a previous field. Believe it or not, I was a high school teacher in my first job, and so I do still like part of that. And a fun part for me in this role is being able to interact with engineers, A lot of people I work with are engineers. You're shaking your head, Aaron. Sounds like ExxonMobil is very similar, and helping educate them. It's a curious group too, right? Very bright group. Helping educate them on, sure, the things they can do and can't do, but also the why. Why it's important. I'm somebody who doesn't just kind of relay the information, but kind of helps educate those people to see why it's important, why they're doing matters. And trainings, we have to do a lot of, there's some level of public speaking, really at whatever level you do in consulting, be it just around a conference table, kind of working through what you saw in the field, being able to relay that to the engineers and the construction leads and land groups and that kind of thing. Being able just to speak in front of a small group, or trainings. You could be doing environmental trainings to groups of 5, 10, or 100 or more. So it's part of it, a fair amount of that, but you get to do some education there as well. So there's a little bit of both. But for me, definitely a little more practical and application.
That is often the sense that I get in the world of consulting, especially industry. You get to move a little bit further into the research side of things. In consulting, it's really about applied. But I currently work with several consultants on doing more research as well. Not just so when there's like maybe a trickier permitting situation or a difficult concept that we're not really sure how to address, I often find myself going to consultants and asking, well, can we come up with a solution? And that's when applied starts moving more towards research. Is that your sense too?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a level of that. Once you've done, say, a master's thesis and you've gone to that level, or I'm sure you've got PhD candidates and PhD students here doing their dissertations. You've gone to that level. Coming over to consultant can seem kind of a little less cerebral, a little less research. And it depends. It really does depend on what kind of consultant you get to be in. And so we've got, like, people like myself, kind of a generalist environmental. Sure, it's been in kind of the wetlands and water bodies, protected species, but we've got some consultants that are very focused in on, say, a certain species.
Yeah.
And they're the expert for that species, and even known among, say, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the state agencies. They know this private consultant firm. They focus in on, say, surveys for this particular type of mussel or this particular type of salamander or fish, and they hold it's a collection permit from the Fish and Wildlife to be able to do those surveys. So certainly those opportunities are there, and that's more of where your PhD people can come in and use that expertise. Who they know aquatics, they know this species, they know the habitat, and they can become, maybe they already are one of those, but they can become the expert for, say, the Southeast on this species, and be one of those consultants that really still gets to do kind of a high level research project.
Yeah. So, Pacifica had mentioned before you came on, she mentioned like one of the interesting challenges of working in industry on her part was being put into a box and sometimes figuring creative ways outside of that box. And I really love that analogy. Thank you so much, Pacifica, for that. So I kind of want to press the same thing to you, because a lot of times people think of permitting as rather dry and boring. I know that for a long time I didn't want to touch permitting because I was like, who wants to sit there and write permits all day long? But the creativity that's involved in it is surprising, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that and speak to how you currently feel about permitting, maybe where you feel that industry is going towards, and what you think you have room to evolve and others have room to evolve there.
Yeah, good question, because I think, especially from an academic world, it does seem kind of dry. You're doing the same thing over and over again. That would be the perception. You're getting Corps of Engineers permit, doing wetland delineations all day long, and let's do it again on the next project. Sure, any job, there's some monotony that kind of is in place there. But if you're someone who likes to get out in the field and likes to do field work, this could be a really good role for you to get into, because you get to go out and see certain areas of the world that even local people, they never step foot out into that part of the, that part of the country, and you get to see some really unique ecosystems. Such a cool thing to get out and actually find a certain habitat that that you're looking for, but you happen to actually, you find it. You find the protected species that, all the maps said it might be here, but maybe not, but you found it. And you get to locate that, mark it out, and protect it. As far as the permitting part, again, I've been in this field for 18 years. It just keeps changing, and it keeps evolving. It keeps getting, I think there's more and more regulation as a whole since I've been involved in the industry. And we're seeing, especially we're seeing regulations, kind of the research-based technical guidance for, say, protected species. There's a lot of movement right now on that. Again, I'm centered more in the Southeast, and we've got a number of protected bat species. There's a lot of research that's going on right now, trying to figure out when the bats are where. What are they doing? How can we best protect them? A lot of those bats are affected from anthropogenic sources. Some aren't. Some it's not human involvement at all, and they're still on the decline. So how can we protect those species? So we're seeing different dates of when we can do different things. I think that's an emerging part of the field that people are focusing in on for research, and consultants. We've got consultants that are leading the charge on that. They're part of bat working groups, and they know the research, they help with research, and they're putting that out there. So there's a lot of that. One surprising thing for me is, sure, again, my background and kind of what I've been doing, but once you get into it, you get into a whole kind of snowball of permitting called the NEPA process. NEPA is, you may have talked about this before I jumped on, I don't know, but the whole permitting world is based on National Environmental Protection Act, I believe is the right name for it. You might have different ways that kind of pull you into that, be it a wetland or water body. But then once you get into it, you talk about wide-reaching, far-reaching. You get pulled into different directions, be it not just natural resources. It can be geology, it can be soils, it can be air permitting, it can be noise. What kind of noise impacts the project have, socioeconomics. These are way outside of an ecologist background, but it's something that really keeps it interesting intellectually for me, because I know all these things are important. And it's a way to make sure, again, that we're doing this thing, we're doing this project, whatever it may be, but we're doing it in a responsible way, a sustainable way. We're protecting the environment, we're protecting marginalized people groups. We're protecting people that live around the area, just to make sure that their quality of life doesn't decrease. So there's a lot of ways that you get pulled once you get into that. And as just the people on the team, they don't see us as ecologists, they just see us as just the environmental person.
Yeah.
That's really going to handle anything from archaeology to socioeconomics. So it really does keep it intellectually interesting for me.
So thank you for that. I want to hedge off a few questions here that are related to the consulting world, and Pacifica, feel free to jump in if you have additional insight. So there's a lot of people asking, well, like, how do I get into consulting? Or after graduating, are there things that I should be doing? Should I get a PhD? Do I just need a master's, or can I enter into the field with just a bachelor's? And I often also get the question of, like, if there was any course that you would recommend taking. I haven't seen that question, but I'll ask it on top, is just what courses might you recommend for somebody that's trying to enter into a consulting world?
Yeah, I'll go first, and Pacifica, please join in too. I think in my specific branch of consulting, a bachelor's is sufficient. I've seen some people without a bachelor's. I've seen a lot of people with masters, and some people with PhDs. But having that bachelor's degree in some type of environmental science, it can be environmental engineering, some kind of ecology, of course, biology, coastal sciences, that those are all fine backgrounds. To do the kind of consulting that I've done, I guess I would say there are really two things that we look for, and I'm not a hiring manager. I wish I were here with a bunch of jobs to be able to get people in. I'm not in that role, but I'm on some of the groups that interview people. If we're looking for a consultant, bachelor's degree to start doing these kind of field surveys, one of the things that we're looking for is plant identification. Do they know just basic level of plant identification? You don't need to be looking at sedge seeds under a microscope to be able to figure out different species, but can you figure out, poison ivy from Virginia creeper, your basic kind of oaks, and kind of distinguish bottomland hardwood from, pine forest, upland areas, and that kind of thing. That's kind of the technical background, and then really just, what kind of person are you? How good are you at adaptability and teamwork, and what kind of mentality do you have? We have a lot of hiring managers. My most recent manager said that she hires the person based on what she sees the person as, and then the skills second. So that's what I've heard from her.
So really about selling yourself as a person and your unique skills instead of necessarily getting all of the classes that you need. Pacifica, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak more from the sort of R&D side rather than specifically the consultant side, I guess, in terms of things that people should do, in terms of as they're I guess, is the question more about as they're finding a role, or sort of in that preparation, which classes to take or things to be planning for? Which
Both.
way?
I think more important is after they graduate and are now finding a role, is there anything that they should particularly sell themselves with, or is there a use to go back to school in any case to take certain classes? And if not, just how do you actually enter into the field? Pacifica, you had a very elongated career trajectory, and you could have already described how you might do that, but advice to others.
Yeah, I mentioned that I ended up in this role because I was talking to people after a career panel. I had followed the invitation of the people in that career panel to find them on LinkedIn and request to set up a 30-minute Zoom call to learn more about each other. And I did that. Half of them got back to me, half of them didn't. And that's where somebody introduced me to somebody. So I would say definitely do those information interviews. And it can feel awkward at first, but if you just treat it as, can I have 30 minutes to ask you more about your role and how you got there? That's kind of how I approached it. Or if it's a scientist and academic, also hey, I wanted to know more about this specific project. I saw your paper on X, Y, and Z. I wanted to ask you questions about it. At the very least, you'll have an interesting substantive conversation and know that you never want to talk to them again. And then hopefully, you have a more of a connection and they introduce you to somebody else, or down the line have a job for you. So I would say the information interviews are really important. And yeah, you should all feel free to follow up with me on LinkedIn and try to set up information interviews with me if you want to try to connect or build on my network, see who I can introduce you to that would be useful. I think so that's sort of as you're actively looking for those roles, I think that's one of the things that's been the most helpful for me, even if I was talking to somebody that I didn't necessarily think I wanted a job with. I've learned interesting things and they maybe connected me somewhere else, or out of the blue offered me an opportunity. So I think it's a useful thing to do. Getting the relevant experience, especially where I am right now in data science, there is some amount of technical skill. Most ecologists use R, but some of us use Python, right? So having one of those kinds of coding skills is useful. If you are interested in bioinformatics, having those bioinformatics skills, experience with Amazon Web Service, AWS, Google Cloud, or other cloud computing, even if it's your university's research computing infrastructure. and coding, like workflow languages, including like Nextflow is a kind of growing in popularity one. Those are all kind of relevant technical skills if you're trying to do more of the big data analysis and or bioinformatics kinds of work.
Yeah, I actually always recommend that people at least take a basic course in artificial intelligence just to learn the limitations of it, because most companies are interested in knowing what they can and cannot do with it. And it's an over-promising era. And to actually know exactly what can be given by technology is sometimes as important as knowing the technology itself. So we have a lot of questions in the chat and very little time. I'm going to run off just a couple ones here that are very common. You mentioned plant identification. Is that based off solely just your knowledge or ability to use a guide? There was something that I wanted to mention when Blake had said this. You know, when you exit academia, you're going to find that people around you don't know a lot of what you know. And, you know, Blake had mentioned educating people in the company. One of the most rewarding things I get to do is to hold like monthly seminars in ecology, and people get really excited when I teach them these basic concepts in ecology that no one at ESA would get excited about. But they're engineers and they don't know this stuff. Oftentimes, you're going to find that the skills that you need in private sectors like consulting and industry, such as plant identification, you don't need to know like specific knowledge. As Blake said, you don't need to be able to go to a microscope and identify the seed there. You just need to know how to use a guide, which is already a step above what most of the non-ecology colleagues might like. Somebody asked how valuable is a strong writing background? Extremely, extremely valuable. Extremely valuable. Practice that every day, no matter what field you're in. Writing is how we communicate. How do we find these jobs? Ecolog is a great place to start, but Indeed is great for consulting and is great for industry, Conservation Job Board. Blake and Pacifica, do you have any other suggestions there?
More suggestions for finding jobs?
Yeah, for finding jobs.
I think following relevant people on LinkedIn is a great way. Like people are posting things on LinkedIn. If there's specific companies, keeping an eye on their websites, but also they're like people on LinkedIn that might be posting open roles and applying quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, another idea is your connections. Even if you can just talk it up amongst people, say in your lab at school or just other students, talk to your professors, see if they can connect you with a recent or a couple of recent graduates who are in a couple of different fields. 100%. If you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in this field, they're going to want to meet up with you because they're like you. You know, they're enthusiastic about what they do. They'd love to meet up with you, even if it's Teams or whatever, and just talk with you. But those personal connections are key.
Great. So we have a lot of questions, and I promise I will send these out to both Pacifica and Blake, and we will get you answers to them in at least a week. We'll send them out to all of the folks that attended the chat, and we are looking to start a blog with all of these questions and answers to help others that might be interested in these questions in the future. We do have webinars coming up. Next month, we have Dale Strickland and Kinga. I cannot pronounce her last name without help, so I'm not going to do it. They are both in the consulting sector, but we are branching out in next webinars to government as well as NGOs. We have a museum coordinator coming on, and we have somebody who works as a lecturer at a community college coming on. So we have a lot of diversity coming in as far as other job opportunities. And I just want to thank everyone. Thank you so much to Pacifica and Blake for your time today. It always seems like it's limited and we could keep on answering questions, but rest assured that your story about your job and your experience is really helpful to a lot of people. I encourage everyone to follow us on LinkedIn. That is sort of where jobs get kind of done nowadays. ResearchGate is useful for academic careers, but really LinkedIn is where people connect, and it's kind of the new business card. And it's even better because you can contact people and ask them all sorts of questions. Don't be worried if we don't get right back to you when you do email. It does take some time and we are quite busy, especially towards the end of the year, finishing up things. But we welcome all questions and comments. Thank you so much, and have a great one, guys.
Thanks for organizing this and inviting us, and thanks to everyone for your questions and making it worth our time to share our experience by being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
See you.